Going back to do this for the North Links Art Society, they very kindly invited me to demonstrate at a hotel there, which is right near to Grimsby Technical College. And the hotel turned out to be the very house I used to live in when I was a student at Grimsby College myself, over 40 years ago. And my old flat has now been turned into the ladies' toilet. So I'll show you a little bit of filming here of the college, and then some of the area that I used to have as my old haunting ground. The park was rather fun to go and draw in. And I'll show you some of the work that I did as a student then, all those years ago when I was only 18, and what the place looks like now. And then we'll get into the atmosphere of the demonstration, the Art Society, and make a start on this painting and how we can paint a very large and loose piece of work in watercolour with this style.
Okay, no worries.
Normally I'd manage half this size in 2 hours, so really going to push me. I start with the midtones. If I'm working with more opaque paints, especially at the horizon, if I work from the horizon in a painting, it's usually the midtones, and then I work outwards. And I paint all my midtones right the way throughout the painting, getting an effect of light. I'm after an effect of light here first of all, and then gradually pulling the detail out. So I get a coherence, a oneness. And then I'll work into my darks and I'll finish with my highlights. We've got sunlight coming over something, so that's the highlights at the end, doesn't it? It makes sense, and it's great fun. The painting just suddenly comes together. It's alive, it's vibrant. But here I want to concentrate on possibly something like, where's that camera? Can we get it on there? That way a bit. I want to concentrate on her face, things like this figure, the back of her head, maybe these chairs, they can go in later on, these bits of sign work. Those are my salient sorts of points in this particular picture, all right? Once I've got those, then I can start to work far more loosely around it and become looser and looser. I may decide to leave a slight vignette at the side rather than paint right to the edges. It's all part of the composition. You don't have to paint right to the edges of things. And I've got to decide where I'm going to just paint right to where I'm going to paint tighter. A watercolour is always a battle. You have to plan quite a bit of it ahead. So I've already had a quick look and decided that's where I'm going to start. And we've got cool and warm yellows. Now, in every single colour there is a cool and warm. In yellow, it would be the lemon yellow or the aureolin yellow as a cool. It would be the yellow ochre or the raw sienna as a warm. In the reds, it's going to be cadmium towards the warms. It's going to be the alizarin towards the cools. In the greens, we've got our sap greens towards the warm, or the viridian again towards the, not alizarin I meant in the cool reds, the viridian towards the cool greens. Usually mix most of my greens anyway, and it's a good test for a beginner. If you want to learn about making greens, take all the blues you've got and all the yellows you've got and do a colour chart. See how many different variations of green you can get by trying those various blues and yellows out together. I want to paint wet into wet here on this figure, just coming down between, let's have a look, yeah, that's some white there, but to leave that, so just, I like to start with a fairly damp surface. I'm just going to work that bit first of all. And foundation colour. Straight to, I think, in this case, a little bit of cadmium orange. Oh man, that's a lot. It is wet. And a wee touch of Indian red. Just to get this colour going. And remember that watercolour dries a couple of tones lighter than when you put it on. So that might seem quite strong now, but actually it's going to be quite light when it dries out. And I can drop into that. I'm just going to feel my way for a moment. I've got to get myself going, motivated going. So that's my base colour. Now a wash is your first coat like that, a thin coat. A glaze would be a second coat over that when it's dry. And so I don't know how much all of you know. All I can do is chat along and hope that some of it you don't know and some of it you will. Now while that's still wet, I can start working into that. And this particular painting I want to be very colourful. I'm not going to go limited palette, I'm going to really push my full palette here and have some fun. I want to enjoy it as well. And if I'm enjoying it, hopefully you will. So I'll have a good bit of fun with it. So I'm going to go right down to a purple now. Deliberately come in with quite a strong purple into there. In my darks, into the hair here straight away. While it's wet into wet, and just let the paint be the accent. I'm working obviously on the vertical, so I've got to be a little bit careful because things are going to start all flowing downwards. But I'm going to try and use gravity to my benefit, which is more than my figure can say. Honestly, I put on it. God, I've been staying at 14.5 stone for about 3 years, and I got back up to 15, and it's Christmas, and I just can't get it off again. So maybe this trip to Colombia will do it, because the person I'm staying with is a vegetarian, so I can lay up for meats. A little bit warmer there. I'm going to take a little bit of rose and just drop it in. Now remember that rather than always mixing colours on the palette, you can very often get a nicer effect by dropping colours one into another here on the paper. Right.
Is that a sable brush you're using?
This is my artificial, I can't, sable? What's then? This is my Pro Art nylon, which is the same sort of thing, yeah. But the nylon, I find the nylons these days are so good for the money that you know, you don't. If you can afford the sable's fine, but I just find getting away with nylons. Nearly everything I like nylons. You know, if you look through my set here, there's a use for everything. It isn't like a fisherman with 200 floats, and he only uses two all the time, his favourites. I don't use just one or two brushes. I have my favourites. Like Ron Ransom, I could use a hake and a rigger, or I can use my mop and a round and get away with nearly everything. But for this purpose, I'm also going to be using swords. And the reason for the swords on this particular painting is because of the control I've got to paint single shapes and twist the brush. So for this particular effort, swords are very, very useful. They also will give me a fine line as well, rather than use a rigger. And the flats I'm going to save till the end for doing my loose brushwork. Right, that's some of my warms gone in. Now into that, let's take a little bit of some Prussian and darken the outside of that straight away. So I am painting a little bit by numbers here. I'm painting bits in at a time at the moment, just to get the effects I want. But nice soft effects of light. I'm not painting in all the little bits of hair and tweaking in the eyes and don't be doing all that. Now watercolour, we're always painting the darks and leaving the lights behind. Rather than any other medium, which is opaque, where we're doing the opposite, and we can go both ways, or we can paint lights over darks. Here I can't. So I've got to gradually work up my darks, just softly at the moment, just indicating. I don't want to get too much detail, I'm just indicating these shapes. I don't, let the eye do the work, let the viewer do some work. Don't do it all for them, they get bored. Let them imagine things in it. He does a lot of that at the moment, but then I can't imagine half the stuff he does. Well, there's primitive arts all very well, but give me a couple of walls in the Royal Academy, I'll do a few big ones too, I tell you. It's who you know, not what you know again, isn't it? Okay, a bit more warmth into there. While it's still wet, now we've got to watch cauliflowers here, because I'm painting sort of just at the edge of I'm just dropping a few more warms into there. But you can get the feel of it coming already, you know, just soft, simple, keep it simple. But it's a lot warmer here. I want a little bit more warmth there. I'm going to take just a touch of clean my brush again. I'm going to drink this later probably. One of my students the other day ruined a cup of tea, stuck a brush in it. How often do we do that? Yeah, a little bit warmer there. Take a little bit of cadmium, and the cadmium is a little bit more opaque. I'm just going to drop that in down at the chest here. You see the difference that makes. Now, when something on a painting doesn't look right, it isn't always that same thing. It could well be something next to it. Example, painting a sunrise at Bridlington, and it was a really orange sun coming up bright, and I put more and more yellow, more and more orange. It wasn't working. Stupid man. Do the opposite. In our armoury, we've got warm against cool, light against dark, rough against smooth. We've got the opposites in the colour circle. We've got our complementary colours, all of that going on. So all I did was put in more cools, and the sun, then the oranges became more. It's the opposites, isn't it? So one colour in a painting can change the whole thing. You notice, now I've said it, some of you haven't, if you haven't noticed it, in nearly every one of Constable's landscapes there'll be a little red figure.
Oh, yes.
Why? You said yes, go on, why?
I don't know.
Why? Shut up there. No, it's not to do with the mouse or whatever. It's because red is the opposite to green in the colour circle. And it will make the green seem greener. That one little dot of red will make all the green seem greener. So this is what we're doing. If you wanted to paint a fluorescent coat on somebody, you wouldn't use fluorescent paint. If you wanted to paint a silver pot, you wouldn't use silver paint. You would use the correct colours relevant one to another, the reflections in the glass, the reflections on the silver. You'd paint those colours. So we want the fluorescent pink to look very bright, then we'd have to use something in the opposite side. So if I want a very bright beach scene with bright sand, midday, then I would use, say, chrome yellow for the sand, but I use purple, which is the opposite to yellow, on the shadows. If I wanted a duller beach scene, a day like today, then I'd be using yellow ochre or sienna, and possibly just the burnt sienna for the shadows, which would give me a much softer, still a stronger colour. And tonally, remember the difference, that if we photograph this, the tones would look quite different in black and white than they will in colour intensity. A yellow looks far brighter than a blue, but it isn't in fact. So tonally, you've got to squint down for something. Whenever you're looking for something and you want to see the tones, squint your eyes down, and it cuts the light down and you then see the tones more clearly, okay? If you haven't tried that, try it. You can see that. It cuts it right down to almost black and white, you know. And for colour, widen your eyes even more to see more. So tone squint down, colour see more. Oh dear, there's so much to do. This is just one session. Right, now I'm going to go a bit cooler on my plate. I'm going to go right through. Oops, I'm going to go right through here. I don't want to push. But if I'm going to do this in 2 hours, I've got to really get on. Stop nattering too much. I've got to really get on and get some colour going here for you. Let's get that red onto there, right through with a little bit of yellow in it. To hell with that. Right down the chest. Here we go. And then we'll drop in, while it's still wet, the darks around the edge here. Let them spread down. Controlled accident. I can come in later and tidy this up. Now, somebody said to me the other day, because for my students, I've been doing lessons in perspective, and I sit down and we have a whole session together where I'll do all, talk about aerial perspective and linear perspective and so on. Can I do the same with colour? Can I do a session on colour? I said, well, not really, because every one of my paintings is going to be different. Because I capture the time of day, the moment and the mood. I'm not I can't say you paint flesh just with this colour. Every single painting I do will be a series of different colours. So there isn't just one colour for flesh. It isn't green trees, blue sky, pink flesh and the rest of it. It's totally dependent on the light and the mood and the atmosphere I want to get at the time. That dried little, otherwise it's all going to flow too far. Now the other one is dried just enough for me to come back and just go in again, this time with a glaze. And remember, with glazing, we're playing with lost and found edges. So in other words, I can soften an edge any time I want with a bit of clean water. That's a hard edge because I'm now painting wet onto dry. Wet next to wet, soft, wet onto wet, soft, wet onto dry, hard edge. Got a hard edge there for more detail if I want it. Coming up here, I'll just put the bit of indicator parting coming there. Coming down there, back of the head. So we're bringing her out, we're just indicating, giving an impression, so I can soften that a fraction there, with a bit of dry brush work down there. That's it, leave it alone. Up to him, working with my lightest colour first. His coat is a very light mauve, but I'm not going to start with that. I'm going to start with a bit of rose, and I'm going to drop my colours into that. Leave a couple of white lines down there. And now I'm going to go to the cooler colour. I should come over that with a little bit of cerulean blue and cool that down a bit. Get the shadows going in there. Under his arm. Just indicating, just feeling it. Let the wet in the wet do the job. Now, coming down here, talking about the cerulean blue, well, I've got cerulean blue. When you've got something on your brush, it's often wise to use it wherever, because, so as you're mixing up again, let that come in, let that dry for a little bit. Anywhere else? Yes, while we're at it, up here. So, painted by numbers, fill in these shapes. It's blue, yeah, in the background here, bit of blue there. That's blue, cerulean on the coat here. But coming into it is a bit of green, so I'm going to bring a little bit of viridian into that. Just let that melt in. Just an indication. What I'm going to do is indicate very, very loosely at this stage. Right. Now back to him as it's dried off just enough now. I hope to start putting in some of the darker colours, a little bit of that Prussian, and we'll come in into his shadow here. Let that just trickle down the side of his trouser. Quite simply, I could be using a sword now to do this, but as the figures are so big, my mop's going to do me for most of my painting. I'm also quite a lazy painter, can't be bothered to change brushes, but quite simple. Just get in there, and we've got the effect. Under that arm, around here. Now, back of his head. A little bit of warmth down the side, top, that's it, you'll do. Green up here. Keep it simple, keep it easy, don't get bogged down, keep the whole thing working if you can. Right, that person there, very light pink to start with. A little bit of rose and a thin glaze, there we go, over that. All the way down, I think I'll go right through the trousers there because I want to get a purple there in a minute. Down to there, then the stronger red, like a bit of the cadmium, or bright red, either would do. Drop that in, you see how strong we get that. Now, broken colour works by one colour glowing through another. By dropping one colour into another like this, I am getting a brighter effect than if I mix them, because the colour is almost just glowing through it. Oh, I've got that on my brush, let's put the traffic light in. If I'm using opaque paint and I wanted broken colour, because I've got a bit of mauve now, then if I paint yellow spots next to red spots, I'm going to have the effect of the eye being fooled to make it look like orange. And that's a very vibrant way to work, and it's the way I often do work. So I'll let that dry a bit now. We'll go back to here again because that's dried up enough. A little bit warmer, fraction alizarin into that. And we'll come back and make this a bit darker. We'll go quite strong because it's going to go lighter later. Blue there, and around the front, right down the side of the head, down there. Now, take a smaller brush just for a minute, and this is where we might need to blend in. So wet the edge and let that just flow down into the water and soften off like that, look. And while that's on my brush, I can use the same paint just to indicate on the side of the nose, just to make it simple. We're not using flesh colours, I'm using the colours that are there. Onto another. And just soften that neck, curve it round a little bit with some clean water. Quick as that. Back to my mop. And down to this figure again, where there was a brighter purple. Should be dry enough now just to lay in a little bit of darker colour. Not quite, just get a bit stronger. We have two ways of doing this. We can put one glaze over another to make something stronger. In other words, the paint is dry. Paint the same paint you just painted as the wash as a glaze over the top, and you've got twice the amount of paint, therefore it's a glaze. Equally, I could put more pigment like that onto the paper and let that work in. It's still just wet enough to do. So in this case I'm not using a glaze, I'm still dropping the wet into wet. And it's a little bit of shadow coming down there. And behind the figure there. Now, so I'm still treating the whole thing very loosely. I'm going to be even looser yet when I get going. That's a bit warmer up here. Hair, sunshine, and then into that a little bit of burnt sienna to come around the edge there, and maybe a little bit of purple later. I'll just give that a bit of the hair there. While I've got that on my brush, there we are, bit of the cake, gâteau, patisserie, and this girl's hair. It's fairly cool, that yellow there, and then it goes to a warmer one there. So let's give her a little bit of the aureolin yellow, which is that lovely lemon look. It's much nicer than the lemon, I think. And I'm going to give the whole of her hair that. If you want to leave a bit of sparkle in the paper, you can. It's up to you. Then I'm going to come to my warmer yellow, and let's now come to the raw sienna and start to drop that in a bit more up here. All awake still? Good.
Yeah.
Trying to keep you alive. Because I enjoy it. I mean, you know, I'm nattering away here to try and impart more for you, but I just happily just carry on painting. If you weren't there, I'd just carry on painting. Right, and warmer still. Let's take a bit of the burnt sienna. Drop that in up here. Some lovely colours. A little bit stronger than you might think because we know they're going to go lighter. And let the watercolour do the work for you, the wet into wet. Whichever medium we're using, use it for the beauty of the medium, which is what I'm always saying with my students. They bring me a photograph along and say, well, what are you trying to do? You're going to copy this photograph? And if so, why? So I make them question what they're doing a bit. We don't just copy. And then we say, well, okay, the field of hay wange you're about to do here, of all these huge round bales of hay, why are you doing it? It's going to be awful just trying to copy that with just acrylic or whatever. So we build it up in that technique I've just shown you, and then we get all this lovely texture going, and it becomes a work of art, not just a reproduction of the photograph. I am making a work of art, and it's about the watercolour, it's about this beauty of the medium I'm using. Yeah, it's not going to be a copy of this photograph. Not what I want. I might as well put the photograph up for that. I am doing a painting, and I want to get something a bit more special out of it. So I'm going to work into this more. While it's still wet, let's get these effects of gradually building it up here. Get her hair, not by painting little lines of hair in, but just by painting the right shapes in the right places gradually. Just put more deeper blue in there. That's how that blue makes a difference to the warms. I'll go warmer again, right down there. If I make a mistake, I can lift out. Remember, I can take the brush, clean the brush, dry it, and come back in and lift the colour out. Now, while I'm at this, I do want to link up the very dark colour there with the hair. So I'm going to just come in with some indigo and a little bit of burnt sienna, and really whack in that shape right now. And oops, I need to do that, never mind, later, a bit of perspective. Don't worry about things, don't panic, just, I'm telling myself anyway. And I need a little bit of white. I haven't masked this particular picture. The other one I was going to do for you, if I hadn't got time today, was all masked up and everything else, but I'm going to go to masking fluid on this for the minute. Let's see, that dark comes down there. A bit loose, keep it just. And here we go again. Let's really get in there now. A bit more of the Prussian now. And then more sienna to make it a bit warmer. Feeling these shapes, keep it lovely and loose. It's lovely just filling in a shape, you know. Enjoy it. Enjoy your watercolour. And don't get all bogged down with having to paint little details. This is a lovely way to paint loosely. All of these ways I'm showing you in the oils and this, it's just a lovely way to paint. Well, I'm at that colour and I've got some blue on my brush. Let's look at the other blues. One blue next to another will totally change things anyway. So on we go. A little bit of paper showing there. Let that dry off a bit. Over here it's much lighter. I'm going to get in the way. You can see all right behind me there, so I'm going to get in the way too much for you. You can see how quickly it starts to come. And it's the same with the oil painting. I normally have to finish an oil painting on plein air within 2 to 3 hours, otherwise the light is changing. Right, back to the sky here. It's just dry enough now to start working in, quite simply, shadows and a few creases, just indicating, nice and loosely. Here we are. Shadows under his arm, dark line down the back, a little bit more darker hair at the top here, back of his head. Keep it as one stroke if you can. Simple one stroke painting. A bit dark behind there. And there's a little bit of warmth going on his trousers, just a little bit of a tone going. His pants here, not much, that's it, that's all we need. That green needs to be a little bit stronger. A little bit there just to indicate. Okay, the warmth that we wanted, back of the head there now needs to be picked out a little bit more. And the dark down. There they are. Light against dark, rough against smooth, cool against warm, gradually building it up. Now, I carry cerulean blue as my coolest, then cobalt blue, which is this one. It's a lovely blue. And then ultramarine, which is this one, which is a warmer blue. And then we start to go towards, and then I cover in Prussian, and we start to go towards the purples. Try and keep simple brushstrokes, keep it nice and clean. Take some cobalt violet, colour you cannot make, so it's a very useful colour look. Lovely light purpley pink. Can't make it, so it's one you need to buy. Now I'm not going to paint all the patterns in, I'm just going to indicate and gradually give the impression of, we're painting an impressionist watercolour here, nice and lively and loose. How am I doing? Oh, we're not doing badly. It's half an hour into it, so, you know, it's quite a rapid way of working, isn't it, you see? And hopefully it's keeping you awake. I promised I'd do that. Am I all right so far, then?
Yes,
You down, or
I've
something?
made notes, Peter, you're all right.
If I want to get invited back again, I've got to be good to you, you know. After that food today. No, it's really nice to come over and, you know, it's just like deja vu, really, coming back to the actual place where you used to be as a student. It's quite weird. Playing one colour against the different blues against another and the different purples. Gradually building them up. Right, these little figures back here, go to a slightly smaller brush. I'm going to go to now, because I'm going smaller, I'm going to go to a sword now. And I can just manipulate that, so if I want to, I can take, say, in this case, a bit of Indian red and go across his face, but I can twist the brush as I go to do it just in one stroke, see, like that. And the same with the little bits in here, a little bit more. So the swords are quite useful, because you've got that manipulative quality. Just keep it all lovely and simple and just make an indication of things. Let me go back in there again. And drop in some more of the reds to make those warms seem a little bit cooler. So if I put a stronger colour next to another colour, it makes that previous colour look lighter and so on. That will do. And that is a very, very, I'll take some of that cobalt violet and just drop that in there like that. And he's got a slight check shirt, so we'll take a little bit of the blue and just indicate with a few lines that he has that check shirt. Now getting back on that, the gold, let's go through here. Just indicating, then those light bottles. A little bit greener back there, so a bit of blue into it. Some deader, more inert grey just there. I'm going to take my mop again because there's a large dark area here that I want. But I'm not, no, I won't do that dark area there yet. The reason being that I've got those leaves, and I want, obviously I've got to put dark around light, haven't I? I've got to plan ahead. So because I've got those leaves, I'm not going to put them in with gouache or lighter paint. I'll have to put those leaves in before I put that dark in there. So I'll plan that ahead in just a moment. Let's get that wagon in the back there for the minute. Now, I'll start with that orangey colour again on the wagon, because I want to drop a red into it. Like pinker at the top, so we'll go back to my...
Do you have a favourite medium? Do you prefer watercolour?
Nope. I just enjoy whatever I'm doing at the time. If I was stuck on a desert island, possibly pastel because it's so versatile, and water or whatever. But oils, I think, would be my tops, generally speaking, yeah. Now, I want to get some darker, cool colours in the shadows here. I'm just going to drop in a bit more dark around her face and down here. She is a little bit more dark in there as well. So that's dry enough now to start painting a few harder edges, just indicating. The same here, I can just come in with one or two cools, just indicating a bit darker against that, the feeling of the hair a bit more. In fact, I'll take a little sword for that, because it's a bit curly and I can just get a bit more of a wave going just to indicate what's happening there. That's it.
You mentioned layering earlier and not following on top of an oil with an acrylic.
Yeah, you can put oils over acrylics, but not acrylics over oils, because of the actual medium.
Is that also true for water mixable oil? If you try to put acrylic on top of a water mixable oil, will that
You
work?
might get away with that because it might bond. I don't like them. I've tried some of my students and I find the colour, I don't know how you find them, but I find the colour just not, it makes muddy greys for me, that water soluble oil. I prefer the pure, but that's just me. I mean, if you like it, then it's worth trying it out. I can't see why what you're saying wouldn't work. It's a good point. Experiment. There's no There are some things that just won't work, you know, but there's no hard and fast rule. If there was, I wouldn't have invented half the things I've done. I was one of the first people to start using acrylic inks and pastel waters over the top. What? How many years ago now? 20 plus? Because I wanted to invent this other way of working. And I had a need for it, so just indicate that tree back there. Easy as that. Darker to blend in with the hair there, so that the shadows sort of come together a bit there. Half light. And down there. And keep it simple. When you're drawing shapes like hands and feet and so on, don't start to draw all the fingers. Draw that as a whole shape. Draw that outline like a bear's paw. And then come in afterwards with your fingers. Same with feet and limbs and things. Get the basic proportions first and then come in. If you try to draw all the fingers, it won't work. Same with drawing a bottle. If you're drawing a bottle, do a centre line as I've done there, and then work each side of it, because otherwise you end up with one bottle higher than the other higher than the other. You know, keep the shapes simple. Feel across with a brush, dry brush there. This is why I use a rough paper for this one. If I was doing a very detailed painting, if I was doing the watercolour pencil, then I'd be using a hot press. But with this, I want to use the sparkle of the textural surface in the same way as I would if I were doing this as a seascape. I want that rough texture going on. Right. Now, let's get up here for this lettering. I think we need to get, whoa, let's just sit in there. Okay. It's got some lovely oranges and yellows going on up there. So I'm going to really whack into that now. And I do want that not to be too much dry brush work there, although I'm going to do a little bit. Take some chrome yellow. Look at that. Watercolour does not have to be dead. So many people think that you've got to... Well, Ron Ranson once said the same thing. Why do people have to paint watercolours as if they've got gauze over them? You know, you don't. It can be a wonderfully bright medium.
Do you use the same brand of paint?
Not necessarily. What have I got here? I think that's Winsor & Newton, these. But as long as they're artist watercolours, that's the important point. As long as you've got artist quality, it doesn't really... The paints don't make that... The colours I found are very similar. Papers, that's a different matter. Very different, yeah. You talked to me about papers and, you know, the amount of glue size a watercolour paper has in as compared to another. Let's leave that a little bit rough at the edges there, look. Yes, then, you know, you've got to experiment with your watercolour papers. I use a Waterford, no, a hot press, which one I use? Arches hot press. And I usually use Waterford for most of my other watercolour. But Bockingford's quite nice. Right into that with the orange. Just enjoy letting the watercolour do its thing, look. Don't pussyfoot, get in there and enjoy it. And now mixing on the paper.
And did you wet and stretch that paper?
It has been, yeah. For this job, even though it's 300, because I'm using so much water, I don't always, very seldom actually, I mean I'm quite happy most of the time with just ordinary masking tape. Up to £140 anyway. Look for these colours. Photographs tend to always blanch things out, so you've really got to look for your colours. Let that dry off a bit now because I want to put the lettering in and I can't put the lettering in if it's wet. Let's have a look at this area of leaves down here. If I mix, now that's a fairly warm green. We have to remember with greens that they reflect the light and people have trouble with mixing various warm and cool greens. If you've got a very light blue sky, that's going to be reflecting onto shiny leaves and making light blue leaves. If you've got a stormy day and so on, it's very different. Here it's underneath this canopy and it's very warm, it's very orange, isn't it? So I'm going to use the raw sienna and a little bit of the cerulean, and we'll get a fairly warm green for that look. And I'm going to go a little bit more yellow, so a little bit more into there. Wet into wet, all the way down. It's lovely and loose, just feel those leafy shapes. No matter if some of the other colour comes into it. When I get the darker colours into this in a minute, it will make more sense, because I'm going to put much deeper, cooler shadows into this. All the way down, comes into the darks there. It's so big, this painting, you forced me to stand up. This is not good enough. Yeah.
You're
Extra
going to
money.
charge us extra.
Well, that's it, yeah. I should move you for the future, not big one again. So not your group again, oh no. Right, while that's still wet, let's take some ultramarine and the same, the sienna. Just make a cooler version of it. And just drop these shapes in leafy shapes with the tip of the brush, feeling. I look with my eye at the surface and the object, and I transfer via my eye, through the brain, what little there is of it, left of it these days, to my fingertip, and I'm making marks about what my eye is feeling on the surface of this paper. So brush control and management are quite important. Brush skills are quite important in something like this, aren't they? Different brushes will give you different effects. You know, a fan brush is great for making winter trees, or for blending oils, for getting soft cloud effects. Rolling this brush will give me a different, and so on and so on. You need to really experiment with the brushes. The room's pretty warm as well, so I'm not surprised some of you are flagging a bit. I had another yawn there. It's forgivable.
Very generous.
I am. I could put you in detention or stand you in the corner with it.
Naughty step next.
So you see how loosely we can paint. Good fun, yeah? You can make this as detailed as you want. You can carry on tightening up into this as much as you want. Yeah, well. And that's another thing. The amount of students I've had come to me who want to paint looser, and this is the way we go. And maybe we're painting with acrylic inks and making just a lovely sunflower effect of those colours coming out. I'll suddenly say, now stand back a minute and stop. Oh wow, what have I done? I don't want to go any further. With one or two touches of pastel, because they've created an abstract. In every figurative painting there's going to be the abstract qualities. It's quite hard to do an abstract painting, to do it well and intuitively, but in all of this we are working very much about the abstract. Colour planes, fields, drawing, composition, intuition, they're all abstract things, aren't they? Right, I'm going to now take the, now this is a lovely colour to use, the burnt sienna and ultramarine blue give us one of our darkest, but it gives us a wonderful dark colour look.
So what colour is ultramarine?
This is ultramarine and burnt sienna, one of the nicest colours for making a dark. Ultramarine also granulates on your paper. Anybody not know what that means, granulate? Right, so in other words, it granulates in between the texture of the paper, so when you're mixing it with this, it will do the same, it will granulate, so it can give you quite a nice effect as well. If you've got questions to ask, please, it doesn't matter what subject, just because we're doing watercolour, this is what my students often forget, is that whatever we're doing at the time will also link with another painting later. And, you know, just because you're learning one thing now doesn't mean to say that some of those things aren't going to come out in paintings later and be used in parallel. Now, that dark I couldn't put in here earlier, I can now go back to my Prussian and, again the same, the burnt sienna, And now I can paint that in whack and into there, look, and leave that light showing really loosely around that table, over that basket. So loose.
Yeah.
I've not enough time to faff about and go into this in great detail, so I'm deliberately going to be painting very loosely.
If you're making and trees and that, do you always work dark to light or light to dark or mixed? Do a bit of that then?
If it's watercolour, you have to work...
No, acrylic.
Acrylic,
Yeah.
midtones, as I was just saying, work your midtones up and then go in with the darks and then finish with the sunlight over the top.
Light.
Yep, always finish with the lights over the top.
Yeah.
You can see how it's gradually pulling together, just painting the right colours and the right shapes, and gradually the whole thing will pull together. And we put our darks in between, leaving the lights shining out. Now we're going to go back down to these trousers a bit darker under the trousers like that. Bring out those shadows a bit to bring the light out down the side of her face. A bit darker again there, just into that eye. A bit darker around the top of her head, just to catch this quite strong. The stronger the light, the stronger your shadows are going to be. So if you've got very strong sunlight, you've got very dark shadows and very light. Yesterday one of my students was failing with the landscape because he wanted a very grey Threadlethorpe day, most of the year. She had this bright yellow background. I said, well, where's that come from? If you were doing a really bright beat scene, yes, but it isn't. So, I said, here, tone this down. I made some various greys and started glazing with acrylics over those. And suddenly it came to shape and she could see what I meant. I'm just going to indicate these things. I'm not going to go into darks coming down. So we've got the table just starting to come out now. A little bit darker just there for that table, just to show the difference between the table and the table. No, not too much detail. More shadow going on down here and on those. Right, one brush. How big's that one? Should do the job. Oh, right, okay. Yep, hits us all, even the best of them like me. Right. Now, you have a pointy brush. If you make it into a blade, by flattening it, you can paint a thinner line. Don't forget, your brush is quite versatile. You don't have to keep the brush as a point, you can make it as a blade. So for instance, I've made that into a slight blade. If I want to do a thinner line now, I can paint quite a thin line with it, or I can go in the opposite direction and paint a thicker line. Yeah? It seems obvious, but unless I say this to people, they forget and they think, I've got to use it. God, I had one student come to me, she was in Bridlington years ago, and she was so screwed up by the previous teacher. I felt so sorry for her to get her really loosened up. And the problem was, my teacher said you can only put a wash on left to right, and it was all... These rules and regulations that people... it's control freaks, isn't there?
Do you often paint a landscape, for example, without actually doing any drawing? Just straight on with the paint?
Oh yes, can do all sorts, but I usually just mark out quickly. I just make a few... I need to know where my proportions are. So I just do that with my fingers and make a rectangle. For my students, I have a piece of card cut. A trick for you. Cut your piece of card to the proportions of the picture you want to do. Mark it into quarters and eighths. Don't measure it, mark it into quarters and eighths. Have 2 elastic bands and have one going each way. Now when you hold that up, if you're not sure of perspective, you can move the elastic band and put it against your painting to see your perspective, okay? And you also know your proportions, don't you? So first of all, your drawing, your original composition, is made by the first 2 marks you ever make. Once I've decided the head is there and the chair is there, everything else goes to that by measuring.
Yes.
So you use your camera obscura, your frame, to your composition. You then check the angles against your elastic bands, and voila.
Yeah.
So lots of tips, but
Yeah. I think I did actually. You teach calligraphy as well, do you, Peter?
I have, with the advent of computers, who needs? Thank God. All of that as a head of art and craft design and tech in the past and doing all the posters for every Tom, Dick and Harry, no longer necessary, no.
Have you tried painting first?
Actually, it's a couple of minutes and we'll just I should carry on painting, alright? So if you want to carry on and sit or come back, I'll give you a 5-minute break or so. Is that alright in a few minutes? And I'll just carry on because I want to get as far as I can. And you take a little break and do what you need to do. Come over naturally if you want. Come up to here, have a look, talk with me about the brushes, anything else you want to do.
Do you sell your paintings online?
They're for sale online, but I haven't sold one for years online. When the computers, when all that first came out, there were lots of companies that were offering to sell your work online and so on, weren't there? People want to see the real thing, really. You need people's good galleries or exhibitions, or they want the DVDs, the teaching side, yes, because you can also see comments from the students. I mean, I've got about 200 comments from people who've looked at my films and enjoyed them, so you can see for real. Yeah, so have a little walk now if you want, or just come and talk, or 5 or 10 minutes look if you like. But I'm just going to carry on. Now, if I work quickly, I'm not going to lift the colour underneath too much. So you can see how that stiffer brush gives me a dry brush effect on there, yeah?
Yeah.
But if I'm working quickly, I'm not lifting those light colours. Paper's fairly absorbent. I mean, that exhibition, I just told a one-man show of 150 paintings, as I say, before Christmas, in the middle top floor of the library here. And I asked both the galleries to come. And over that 2-week period, when I went back twice to see one of them, the one I preferred, and on the last day I was taking stuff down, oh, we've been so busy. They're literally 10 minutes, you know, I found out. They couldn't find 10 minutes. We've been so busy. Oh, come on. I just find it insulting, I'm sorry.
That makes difference, that, when you've done that, doesn't it?
Oh yeah.
I thought, oh, you don't really need to do that, but it's...
Now you see what, yeah, it will bring everything out. You see it to base. It's warm and it's cool.
Colours, yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Just feeling the surface. So I said I'd try and show you a nice loose way to work. We've got the lights and darks going on behind. Just indications all the time, not trying to paint everything in detail, just indicating things. Now let's get that nice and dry, bit of brush for that, dry brush there again, just on the surfaces here. Just to feel the surface a bit, right through things, don't be afraid. And you see how the whole thing starts to be pulled together, and we softening down, so we'll just leave that in, that's too bright there. We can start to soften things in with a bit of water. Now you can start to pull together and do as much speed level as you want. But you know, I can soften, I can blend these bits in. If it's too bright there, for instance, which it is, so just soften that down a bit. That coat needs bringing in a bit more there. A little bit more, not far off doing now for what I want to do for this. A bit more warmth in the background. Some of these just indicating some of these doorways. So flat brush is very useful. Right, enough. Just to give you an idea. Good. Yeah. So something. I can carry on tidying up, but a loose watercolour that for the moment.
It's lovely.
Right, okay.
Thank you.
That's really wonderful, Peter. Thank you very much indeed for your time. Thank you for coming. Certainly one or two
Paintings in them. So that's the light one. And then we've got the dark one, which will bring out the grey, leave the light stronger. It's quite hard to tell, isn't it? It's quite nice, the darker one. I managed to get away with almost these two amounts for everything, or the permutations of these 4 colours, you know, I keep them in stock.
Yes,
That's quite nice like that.
So you've got a darker one instead, haven't you?
Yes, so we could always do the other way around, you see. Yeah. You will always want 2 colours, that's right, a window mount. And if you want to really fancy, but I would like to do a bit more and just refine it, you know, I don't mind loose, but I would like to refine it just that bit more. So let's really hit some of these colours into here, and up through here as well. Let's try and get a bit more richness going on that we haven't quite got at the moment. A bit more dry brushwork now that the painting's a bit drier as well, I can afford that. A lot darker, we can afford to make this feel a lot more as if we're underneath this shade. And we look at all the colours. Now it's gone, now it's dried a lot lighter, we can afford to come in on quite a few of these colours. And brighten them up a little bit here and there. Just needs lifting a bit, I feel. We'll tighten up a bit of the drawing here and there. Let's come back now to these. And we'll start looking up a bit more ultramarine into there, I think, to get the blues going a bit more nicely. And that chair, I want to take him down a bit. Perhaps a little cobalt violet and purple down in here as well. A bit more of these, the purple warms going on. Some deep Prussian, a touch of warm. To really get into these darks just here. I'm not going to try and paint it to look like her, that isn't the point. The point is to get an impression of what's happening here. Play these lights against darks that we have to do with watercolour to show anything, because obviously we're working our darker and darker colours in, gradually allowing the lights to stand out, like I'm doing here now with this bottle. And I can put this onto YouTube later so that the students who were watching yesterday can see how it could have been finished, and I would have preferred to have done a bit more as I'm doing now, but time didn't permit yesterday, obviously. And we can still work on some of this and still put some darker bits in if we want. Hopefully by making these little dots, dashes and marks we'll eventually finish up with shapes dark against light, which will make the others stand out enough to start to look, have the illusion of real objects. It's surprising what a few little bits of colour can do just to lighten things up. So I think it was worth working into it. I think taking it a bit further, didn't want to overwork it, but I think in this case just going that little bit further with it has actually helped. I'm missing some quite important shadows back here which I just realised need to go in. I'm going to just touch this one up with a little bit of pastel to see if I can just bring a bit of life back into it. Just here and there where I've lost some of the lights. Just a little sparkle missing here and there that I can just bring out with these pastels. And you see, as we're using rough paper, it almost looks as if it's the paper sparkling through still, so that's quite nice. Take them back if you want them, if they're too much like that.